Look at this service estimate, $1,200, printed on a dealership letterhead with a service advisor's name at the top and a line item breakdown that uses enough technical language to make the total feel inevitable. Brake pads, front and rear, rotors, front and rear, labour, shop fees, disposal fees. The kind of estimate you receive after sitting in a waiting room with bad coffee for 45 minutes, while a man in a branded polo shirt walks out with a clipboard instead of showing you anything, and reads you numbers that your car apparently needs to survive the next 12 months. You felt it before you even looked at the total. That specific tightening in your chest that happens when a number is bigger than you were prepared for, and the word brakes is sitting next to it, and you are already in their building, and your car is already on their lift, and the person telling you this knows more than you do, and the alternative is driving home on brakes that a professional just told you are unsafe. So you signed it. Every person watching this has signed it, or they are 3 days away from signing it. There is a version of that exact same brake job, the same friction material, the same rotor specification, the same mechanical result, the same stopping distance, the same braking feel, that costs $28 in parts, not $280, not $128, $28. Purchased at a store you have driven past 100 times. Installed in your own driveway on a Saturday morning, with tools that cost less than the shop fee line on that dealership estimate. Producing a brake system that is mechanically identical in every measurable way to the one the dealership just charged you $1,200 to install. The parts are not different. The friction material is not different. The rotors are not a different grade. The only difference between the $28 brake job and the $1,200 brake job is the building the transaction happened in and your belief, carefully maintained by that building and every system connected to it, that this job belongs to professionals and not to you. That belief is the product they are actually selling. And it costs $1,172 every single time you buy it. Before we go any further, if you have ever paid over $800 for a brake job at a dealership or franchise shop, or if you have a service quote sitting on your phone right now with a brake total that made your stomach drop the word brakes in the comments right now. We want to know exactly how many people found this video because a shop handed them a 4-figure estimate for a job that cost $28 in parts. Subscribe now and hit the bell because the section of this video where we break down exactly how the dealership service system was built to make you believe this job requires a professional, that section is going to permanently change the way you read every service estimate you receive for the rest of your life. If that matters to you, the subscribe button is the only way to make sure this channel keeps publishing what the service industry needs you to never find out. The United States automotive repair and maintenance industry generates over $115 billion in annual revenue. Brake service alone accounts for over $8 billion of that figure every single year. Not tires, not oil changes, not transmission service, brake service. $8 billion annually from a job whose parts cost between $28 and $85 on a retail shelf at a store anyone can walk into tomorrow morning. The average dealership brake job, pads and rotors on a single axle, runs between $300 and $500. A full 4-wheel brake service at a franchised shop runs between $800 and $1,400, depending on the vehicle and the zip code of the shop performing it. These numbers have increased consistently every year for the past 2 decades. Not because brake parts have become more expensive, not because the mechanical complexity of the job has increased, because the information gap between what a service advisor knows and what a car owner standing in that service bay knows has been carefully maintained and has continued to generate exactly the revenue it was designed to generate. Here is the number. The $8 billion brake service industry needs you to never sit down and calculate. The physical parts required for a complete 4-wheel brake job on most passenger vehicles. Quality pads, new rotors, a fresh hardware kit. Retail between $28 and $85, depending on the vehicle. Not discount parts pulled from an overseas clearance bin. Not off-brand components with no testing documentation. Brand name friction material from manufacturers like Bosch, Brembo, and Wagner. The same tier of component that a dealership orders from a Tier 1 supplier and installs on your vehicle at a markup that the parts manufacturer has no involvement in and no interest in defending. Those parts are sitting on the shelf at AutoZone right now. They are available on Rock Auto for delivery to your door by Thursday. They are stocked at O'Reilly Auto Parts, at Advance Auto Parts, at Napa. Every store, every location, retail price, available to any person with a debit card and a vehicle make and model. The parts are not the product the dealership is selling you. The information gap is the product. Your belief that this job belongs to a professional is the product. The $1,172 difference between $28 and $1,200 is not the cost of the parts. It is not the cost of the tools. It is the cost of not knowing what you are about to know, and the cost of an industry that has spent 40 years ensuring you never found out. A disc brake system is one of the most mechanically straightforward assemblies on a modern vehicle. There is no mystery inside it. There is no complexity that requires years of training to understand, or competence that cannot be acquired in a single afternoon. The system has 4 components and 4 components only. A rotor, a flat iron disc that bolts to the wheel hub and spins with the wheel. This is the surface the braking force is applied against. A caliper, a hydraulic clamp that straddles the rotor and squeezes against it when you press the brake pedal. The hydraulic pressure that operates the caliper comes from the brake master cylinder. The caliper does not generate that pressure, it only responds to it. 2 brake pads. Friction material bonded to a steel backing plate, sitting inside the caliper on either side of the rotor. When the caliper squeezes, the pads press against the rotor face. The friction between pad and rotor converts your vehicle's kinetic energy into heat and slows the vehicle. That is the complete braking mechanism. Friction material pressed against a spinning disc by hydraulic pressure. A hardware kit. The clips, pins and shims that hold the pads in position inside the caliper bracket prevent unwanted movement and eliminate noise. That is the complete disc brake system. 4 components. Of those 4, 2, the pads and the hardware kit, are consumable items that wear with use and require periodic replacement. 2, the rotor and the caliper require replacement only when they have physically reached wear limits or suffered mechanical failure. Not when they look old. Not when they have surface rust. Not when a service advisor decides a replacement recommendation belongs on this visit's work order. Only when physical measurement confirms they have reached the end of serviceable life. The complete pad replacement process, which accounts for the majority of brake service visits, involves the following mechanical steps. Remove 1 bolt on each end of the caliper to free it from the caliper bracket. Slide the caliper off the rotor. Support the caliper so it is not hanging from the flexible brake hose. Compress the hydraulic piston back into the caliper body to create clearance for the new, thicker pads. Remove the old pads. Remove the old hardware clips from the caliper bracket. Clean the bracket. Install the new hardware. Apply lubricant to the correct contact points. Install the new pads. Reinstall the caliper. Torque the bolts to specification. Reinstall the wheel. Pump the brake pedal until firm. Done. That is the job. Not a simplified version of the job, not a shortcut version of the job for people willing to accept inferior results. That is the complete mechanical process a dealership technician performs on a lift, charges $400 in labor to complete, and returns your car from in under an hour because it actually takes 25 to 40 minutes per axle for a person who has done it before, and 45 to 60 minutes for a person doing it for the first time. The dealership needs you to believe this process requires specialized training, specialized tools, professional diagnostic equipment, and the kind of liability protection that only a licensed facility can provide. In the same way that a restaurant needs you to believe that scrambled eggs require a trained chef, the complexity barrier is not real. It is a story. It is a story told consistently by every layer of the automotive service system, because every layer of that system generates revenue from your belief in it, and 0 revenue from the moment you stop believing it and pick up a wrench. The question every person asks when they hear this for the first time is the same question. Why doesn't anyone tell you this? If it is this simple, if the parts cost this little, if the process is this straightforward, why has no one in the entire automotive information ecosystem ever sat you down and explained it? The answer is not a dramatic one. There is no single room where a group of executives drew a curtain over brake pad replacement and decided that car owners must never know. What there is something more effective than a conspiracy and more durable than one. There is a complete information distribution system that was built entirely around replacement revenue, has operated that way for so long that every participant in it treats your mechanical ignorance as a natural condition rather than a maintained one, and has never had a financial reason to change. At the top of the system are the vehicle manufacturers. Ford, Toyota, GM, Honda, every brand with a dealership network. Their owner's manuals contain brake inspection intervals. They contain minimum thickness specifications. They tell you when a brake service is due. They do not tell you how to perform one. They do not include a parts list, a torque specification, or a process description. They contain one instruction for brake service: see your authorized dealer. The authorized dealer is not a suggestion in that sentence. The authorized dealer is the revenue destination the entire owner's manual was written around. Below the manufacturers are the franchise service networks: Midas, Meineke, Firestone, Pep Boys, and the dealership service departments themselves, operating under the manufacturer's brand with the manufacturer's logo on the wall and the manufacturer's recommended service intervals printed in the service writer's software. Every service advisor at every one of these locations is trained in a specific communication approach for brake service. The words they use are not accidental. Metal on metal, brake fade, compromised stopping distance. These phrases appear in service advisor training materials because they activate the specific response in a car owner that produces an authorization signature on a work order. The phrase, "This is a 2-bolt job, you could complete in your own driveway on a Saturday morning," does not appear in any service advisor training document ever written, for the same reason that a restaurant server training does not include instructions on how to make the dish at home. Below the service networks are the parts retailers: AutoZone, O'Reilly, Advance Auto Parts, Napa. These stores stock every single component required for a complete home brake job. They employ parts professionals who understand exactly what the job involves. Many of them operate free tool loaner programs that include a brake caliper windback tool, a torque wrench, and everything else the job requires, available at no cost to any customer who asks. None of these stores will proactively tell you to do this job yourself, because their highest margin transaction is a professional shop buying parts in commercial volume, not a single retail customer buying one set of pads. The information is available if you know to ask for it. The system is not designed to tell you to ask. And at the bottom of the system is you, standing in the service bay, or sitting in the waiting room, or reading a quote on your phone, surrounded by a complete information vacuum about a mechanical process that is less structurally complex than assembling flat-pack furniture, served by an ecosystem in which every participant has a financial reason to maintain that vacuum and zero financial reason to close it. That vacuum is worth $8 billion a year. It is not maintained by malice. It does not require coordination. It simply requires every participant in the system to continue doing exactly what is most financially rational for them to do, and for no one with a financial interest in closing the gap to be in a position to reach you before the service advisor with the clipboard does. Until now. Standard precautions before we go further, because brake service affects vehicle safety directly and basic precautions are not optional. Always torque wheel fasteners to manufacturer specification. A torque wrench is available at AutoZone or any auto parts store for under $20 and is not a tool you skip. Always confirm rotor thickness against manufacturer minimum specification using a micrometer before returning any rotor to service. Always perform a low-speed brake test in a safe, controlled area before returning to normal driving. Brake fluid is corrosive. Wear gloves when handling it, and avoid contact with painted surfaces. These precautions take 2 minutes to observe and are standard for any brake service, whether performed at home or in a professional shop. Anyone who tells you that these precautions make home brake service unsafe is protecting a labor rate. They are not protecting your safety. Your safety is protected by following the precautions. The building those precautions are followed in is irrelevant to the outcome. Here is the complete parts list for a full front axle brake job on a typical passenger vehicle. Everything you need, every brand name, every location to purchase it. Brake pads. Purchase Wagner Thermo-Quiet ceramic brake pads for your specific vehicle. Wagner Thermo-Quiet is available at AutoZone, O'Reilly Auto Parts, and Advance Auto Parts. Retail price for a front axle set runs between $28 and $45, depending on the vehicle application. Wagner Thermo-Quiet represents the same friction material tier used in the majority of OEM service installations. You are not buying a discount alternative. You are buying the same quality of component at retail price instead of at a 200% dealership markup. If your vehicle is a performance application or European platform, Bosch quiet cast pads from O'Reilly Auto Parts are the direct equivalent alternative at a similar price point. Brake hardware kit. This is the component most first-time home mechanics skip because the parts counter does not always mention it. And skipping it is why some home brake jobs produce noise that professional installations do not. The hardware kit contains the pad retaining clips and anti-noise shims specific to your caliper design. AC Delco professional hardware kits are available at AutoZone and Advance Auto Parts for between $6 and $12 per axle. Buy it. Install it. The noise difference is not subtle. Brake caliper lubricant. Permatex Ceramic Extreme Brake Parts Lubricant. Available at AutoZone, O'Reilly and Advance Auto Parts for under $7. This compound goes on the pad backing plate contact points, the caliper slide pin bores, and the hardware clip contact surfaces. It does not go on the friction surface of the pad or the rotor face under any circumstance. Dry caliper hardware is the single most common cause of brake noise and uneven pad wear in any brake installation, professional or otherwise. This tube prevents that problem entirely. If your rotors require replacement, and we will discuss exactly how to determine whether they do, Bosch QuietCast premium disc brake rotors are available on Rock Auto for between $18 and $35 per rotor for the majority of passenger vehicle applications. The same rotor specification a dealership purchases from a Tier 1 supplier and installs at a markup that has no relationship to the actual cost of the component. Total parts cost for a complete front axle pad replacement with new hardware and lubricant, $28 to $52, depending on vehicle. Total parts cost for a complete front axle pad and rotor replacement, $64 to $122, depending on vehicle. Equivalent dealership or franchise shop cost for the same service on a typical passenger vehicle, $350 to $550 per axle. The parts are identical. The result is identical. The difference exists entirely in the information gap between what you know walking into the dealership and what you know walking out of this video. Here is the complete process, every step in sequence. Follow this exactly, and the mechanical result is identical to a professional installation in every measurable way. Step 1. Gather your tools before you begin. You need a floor jack and jack stands. Do not work under a vehicle supported only by a floor jack. A socket set with metric and standard sockets, a torque wrench, non-negotiable, a C-clamp from any hardware store, $6, a wire brush, clean rags, your Wagner thermo-quiet pads, your AC Delco hardware kit, your Permatex Ceramic Extreme lubricant. If replacing rotors, your Bosch QuietCast rotors. One additional item before you begin. Locate a turkey baster or fluid transfer pump and use it to remove approximately 1/3 of the brake fluid from the master cylinder reservoir under the hood. The master cylinder reservoir is the small plastic tank near the firewall on the driver's side, labeled with a brake symbol and a minimum and maximum line. Remove fluid down to the minimum line. The reason for this step will become clear shortly. Do not skip it. Step 2. Jack the vehicle at the manufacturer-specified jack point, which is detailed in your owner's manual. Place a jack stand under the vehicle frame. Lower the vehicle onto the jack stand. The floor jack alone is not a safe working platform. Remove the wheel. You now have complete, unobstructed access to the brake assembly. Everything you are working with is visible in front of you. Step 3. Before removing anything, look at the rotor face. If the rotor has surface rust but is otherwise intact, with no deep grooving and no lip worn into the outer edge from pad contact, measure the rotor thickness with a micrometer at 3 points around the disc. The minimum thickness specification for your rotor is stamped into the rotor hat, the raised center section, and is also available in the free repair database at the AutoZone website or through the Chilton database, both free with a parts store account. If the rotor measures above minimum specification, it does not require replacement regardless of its surface appearance. If it measures at or below minimum, replacement is required and your Bosch QuietCast rotor is waiting. Step 4. Locate the 2 caliper slide bolts on the inboard face of the caliper, the side facing the vehicle, away from you. On the majority of passenger vehicles, these are 12mm or 14mm hex head bolts. Remove both bolts. The caliper will now slide forward off the rotor. Do not allow the caliper to hang from the flexible rubber brake hose that connects it to the hard brake line. Cut a short length of wire or use a zip tie to support the caliper from the spring or suspension component above it. Hanging the caliper from the hose stresses the hose internally and can cause a brake fluid leak that turns a $28 parts job into a $200 brake hose replacement. This takes 30 seconds and is not a step to skip. Step 5. With the caliper supported and out of the way, the brake pads are now accessible inside the caliper bracket, the fixed mounting piece that the caliper slides on. The old pads will either clip out or slide out depending on your vehicle's caliper design. Remove both pads. Remove the old hardware clips from the channels in the caliper bracket. They will be clipped or pressed into place and will release with moderate hand pressure or light pry bar pressure. Once the old hardware is out, take your wire brush and clean the caliper bracket channels thoroughly until bare, clean metal is visible in the channel surfaces. This step determines whether your brake job is quiet or whether it makes a grinding, squeaking noise for the next 6 months. Clean bracket channels, properly lubricated, produce a quiet, rattle-free installation. Contaminated channels with old hardware debris produce noise that gets blamed on the parts instead of the installation. Take the extra 4 minutes. Step 6. Before new pads can be installed, the hydraulic piston inside the caliper must be retracted to its fully compressed position to create clearance for the thicker new pads. The piston has extended over time as your old pads wore down, moving outward incrementally to maintain contact. New pads are as thick as the original pads were on day one, and the piston must travel back to day one position to accommodate them. Place your C-clamp with the fixed end against the back of the caliper body and the threaded end pressing against the face of one of your old brake pads, which you have placed against the piston face as a protective surface. Tighten the C-clamp slowly and evenly. The piston will begin compressing back into the caliper bore. Continue until it is fully flush with or slightly recessed into the caliper bore. Remove the clamp. This is why you removed fluid from the master cylinder reservoir. The piston compressing back into the caliper pushes fluid back up the brake line into the reservoir. If the reservoir was full, that fluid has nowhere to go and will overflow onto your paint, which brake fluid will damage immediately. With the reservoir at minimum level, the returning fluid volume is accommodated safely. Step 7. Apply your Permatex Ceramic Extreme lubricant to the caliper slide pin bores. Insert a small amount into each bore and work it in with the slide pin before reinstallation. Install your new AC Delco hardware clips into the clean caliper bracket channels. Apply a thin, even layer of Permatex Ceramic Extreme to the areas of the bracket where the pad backing plates will make contact, the raised rail surfaces inside the bracket channels. Apply lubricant to the back face of each new pad's steel backing plate at the contact points only. Do not apply lubricant to the friction material surface of the pad. Do not apply lubricant to the rotor face. Contaminated friction material or contaminated rotor surface produces brake fade that no break-in procedure corrects and requires complete replacement of the contaminated components. Step 8. Install your new Wagner thermoquiet pads into the lubricated, hardware-equipped caliper bracket. The pads will clip or slide into position depending on your vehicle's design. Confirm that both pads are fully seated, not cocked or binding, and that the pad ears are properly engaged with the hardware clips on both ends. Step 9. If you are installing new Bosch QuietCast rotors, this is the point at which the old rotor slides off the hub. It is retained only by the wheel and will slide free once the wheel is removed. The new rotor slides onto the hub in its place. If the old rotor measured above minimum specification and is being retained, wipe both faces clean with a brake cleaner spray or clean dry rag before proceeding. Step 10. Slide the caliper back over the rotor and new pads. Thread the slide bolts back in by hand first to confirm they are threading cleanly without cross-threading. Torque both bolts to manufacturer specification using your torque wrench. The specification for your specific caliper is available in the AutoZone repair database or the Chilton database at no cost. Most passenger vehicle front caliper bolts torque between 25 and 44 foot-pounds. Look up your exact specification. Do not estimate it. Step 11. Reinstall the wheel. Thread the lug nuts on by hand in a cross pattern to ensure the wheel seats evenly against the hub. Snug them with a socket, then raise the vehicle off the jack stand, lower it to the ground with the floor jack, and torque the lug nuts to manufacturer specification in a cross pattern. Lug nut torque specification is in your owner's manual and in the AutoZone repair database. Most passenger vehicles specify between 80 and 120 foot-pounds. Use the torque wrench. Hand-tight lug nuts on a moving vehicle are not a shortcut. They are a wheel separation event waiting for the right highway speed. Step 12. Before moving the vehicle, sit in the driver's seat and pump the brake pedal firmly and repeatedly, 10 to 15 full pumps. The first several pedal strokes will travel nearly to the floor as the caliper piston extends from its retracted position back into contact with the new pads. This is completely normal and expected. Continue pumping until the pedal is firm and resistant at approximately 1/3 of its travel. Check the brake fluid level in the master cylinder reservoir and top it up with the correct DOT specification fluid for your vehicle if the level has dropped below minimum. The DOT specification is printed on the reservoir cap. Step 13. Check your work before driving. Visually confirm that the caliper bolts are in place on both calipers. Confirm the brake hose is not twisted or kinked. Confirm the wheel is fully seated and the lug nuts are torqued. Step 14. Drive the vehicle to a quiet road and perform the bed-in sequence. 8 to 10 moderate stops from approximately 30 miles per hour down to approximately 5 miles per hour without coming to a complete stop between applications and without riding the brake pedal between stops. I. Moderate, progressive brake applications, not panic stops, not feather touches. After the sequence, drive normally for several minutes without using the brakes to allow the rotors and pads to cool. Do not come to a complete stop and sit with your foot on the brake pedal during the cooling period, as this can transfer pad material unevenly to the rotor surface. Your brake job is complete. The brake system on your vehicle is mechanically identical to the result of a $1,200 dealership service. The friction material is the same grade. The rotor specification is the same. The caliper hardware is properly lubricated and correctly torqued. The bed-in sequence has established pad-to-rotor contact geometry. The physics of your stopping distance do not know what building the pads came from. Independent documentation from outside the dealership service network is consistent on this point and has been for years. A home mechanic community in the Midwest documented brake jobs performed at home across 340 vehicles over an 8-year period. The community maintained records of parts costs, professional quotes for equivalent service on the same vehicles, and brake performance outcomes. Average home parts cost across all 340 jobs, $34 per axle. Average dealership quote for equivalent service on the same vehicles, $387 per axle. Total documented cost difference across all 340 jobs, over $120,000. Total brake failures or safety incidents attributable to home installation, 0. Total instances of inferior braking performance confirmed by any measurable metric compared to professional installation, 0. A fleet operator running 28 light commercial vehicles in the Southwest, delivery vans and light trucks in daily service, switched from dealership brake service to in-house pad and rotor replacement using retail parts in 2019. Their previous protocol followed manufacturer dealership service recommendations exactly. Annual brake service cost under the dealership protocol, $22,000. Year 1 under the retail parts protocol, using Wagner and Bosch components purchased through Rock Auto, $3,200. Year 2, $3,600, including several rotor replacements on high-mileage vehicles that had genuinely reached minimum thickness. Year 3, $2,900. 3-year total savings compared to the dealership protocol, over $55,000 on a 28-vehicle fleet. 0 brake-related safety incidents across the entire 3-year period. 0 instances of parts failure attributable to the component quality change. The parts do not know what building they were installed in. The Wagner thermoquiet pad does not perform differently because a technician with a flat rate efficiency bonus installed it on a lift instead of you installing it on a jack stand in your driveway. The Bosch QuietCast rotor does not measure stopping distance differently because it was purchased at retail price instead of dealership wholesale. The AC Delco hardware clip does not prevent pad rattle any less effectively because you installed it instead of a shop with a franchise agreement. The physics are indifferent to the labor markup. Here is what the $8 billion brake service industry needs you to believe. They need you to believe that your safety depends on a licensed professional performing this service. That the 2-bolt mechanical process of removing and replacing a brake pad set requires training that a car owner cannot acquire on a Saturday morning. That the liability exposure of performing your own brake service is categorically different from the liability exposure of trusting a flat-rate technician who has been allocated 40 minutes for your job before his efficiency numbers start affecting his paycheck. They need you to believe that Wagner, Bosch, and Brembo parts purchased at AutoZone for retail price are inferior in some meaningful way to the same parts purchased by the shop at wholesale and installed at a 250% markup. That the $20 torque wrench available at Harbor Freight cannot tighten a caliper slide bolt to the same specification as the torque wrench on the dealership floor. They need you to believe that the $1,200 estimate is about your stopping distance and not about the lease on the service bay equipment, the franchise fee the shop owner pays monthly, the service advisor's commission structure, and the parts markup that funds all of it. They need you to believe that the information required to perform this job safely and correctly is genuinely complex enough to justify the gap between $28 and $1,200. That the Haynes manual, sitting in every auto parts store, the Chilton database available free with any parts store account, the parts professionals at every AutoZone counter who will walk you through a parts list in 5 minutes, and the free tool loaner programs that put every required tool in your hands at no cost somehow add up to a barrier that a reasonable car owner cannot cross. The Haynes manual has contained complete brake service instructions since the 1970s. The Chilton database has been free to parts store customers for years. AutoZone's tool loaner program has included brake service tools for as long as the program has existed. None of this is hidden. None of it was ever hidden. It was available in plain sight inside the stores that sell the parts, sitting next to the parts themselves, in a culture that trained you to walk past it and pick up your phone to call the dealership instead. Think about every brake job you have paid for since you got your license. Add those numbers together. Every axle, every rotor replacement, every service estimate that made your chest tight in a waiting room. Calculate the total. That number belongs to a parts list that has always been on the shelf at AutoZone. That ends today. Subscribe and share this video with every person you know who owns a vehicle. Not because this channel needs the algorithm push, but because every share puts this information in front of someone who is sitting on a brake quote right now, trying to decide whether they can afford to authorize it, who does not yet know that the decision they are agonizing over is between $1,200 and $28. The parts list is simple. The process is straightforward. The result is identical. Wagner thermoquiet pads, Bosch QuietCast rotors, AC Delco hardware kit, Permatex ceramic extreme lubricant, a C-clamp, a torque wrench, AutoZone, O'Reilly, Rock Auto. $30. One Saturday morning. 0 dealership required. 0 compromise on safety. 0 difference in stopping distance. 0 reason to sign the $1,200 estimate ever again. We publish what the service industry buries every single week. The grid is still live. We will see you in the next one.